Months after federal authorities from the Department of Homeland Security raided his homes in Los Angeles and Miami, Sean P. Diddy Combs has been indicted by a federal grand jury. He was arrested late last night in New York City. Well, today that indictment was unsealed and U.S. Attorney Damian Williams laid out the charges against the rap music mogul. Here's what he said today in a news conference.
Today I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment, charging Sean Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution. The indictment alleges that between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. As part of this investigation, in March of this year, special agents from HSI executed search warrants at Combs' residences in Miami and Los Angeles. They also executed a warrant for Combs' electronic devices. During those searches, agents seized evidence of the crimes charged in this indictment. They seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 defaced AR-15s and a large-capacity drum magazine. They also seized evidence of the freak-offs, electronic devices that contain images and videos of the freak-offs with multiple victims. And they seized cases and cases of the kinds of personal lubricant and baby oil that Combs' staff allegedly used to stock hotel rooms for the freak-offs, more than 1,000 bottles altogether. Now, I want to be clear about 2 things. First, this office is determined to investigate and prosecute anyone who engages in sex trafficking, no matter how powerful or wealthy or famous you may be. No one should doubt our commitment on that. A year ago, Sean Combs stood in Times Square and was handed a key to New York City. Today, he's been indicted and will face justice in the Southern District of New York. Second, we are not done. This investigation is ongoing, and I encourage anyone with information about this case to come forward and to do it quickly. Anyone with information can call 1-877-4HSI-TIP. I want to express my deep appreciation for the victims and witnesses who have used their voices and helped bring this criminal conduct to light. We would not be here without them.
Folks, you go through the indictment, it just lays out sexcapades. It talks about flying sex workers, male and female, all across the country. It talks about coercion. They also lay out, and they call this a criminal enterprise, how workers for various Combs enterprises, various companies that Sean P. Diddy Combs actually own and control, the role that they played in all of this. I want to get right to it with our legal panel. Candace Kelly, legal analyst from South Orange, New Jersey. Joe Richardson, civil rights attorney out of Los Angeles. Aisha Braveboy, state's attorney, Prince George's County, Maryland. Now, folks, keep in mind, Combs has pled not guilty. And early, they went before the court, and his attorneys had laid out, they had prepared this document that laid out how they could make bond, putting up his $48 million home in Miami. Also, they talked about he surrendered his passport to the lawyer in April. His children, his sons also surrendered their passport, but the judge said no, he was simply too dangerous, and there was a history of violence as well as witness intimidation. Here is his attorney, Mark Agnafilo, after court today.
Tomorrow at 3:30 in front of Judge Carter, the district judge assigned to this case. I think that we made the points that we've been wanting to make. I think he came out. Mr. Combs is a fighter. He's going to fight this to the end. He's innocent. He came to New York to establish his innocence. He's not afraid. He's not afraid of the charges. There's nothing that the government said in their presentation today that changes anyone's mind about anything. He's been looking forward to this day. He's been looking forward to clearing his name, and he's going to clear his name. And we're going to stand by his side as he does. We believe in him wholeheartedly. He didn't do these things. This was a 10-year relationship. There's no coercion. There's no crime. There's basically just someone who brought a civil case and now is finding themselves as a witness in a criminal case. And we're going to fight this case with everything we have, as is he. And eventually he's going to be shown to be innocent. And so tomorrow we fight again. And we'll fight every day until we don't have to fight anymore.
Where's he being detained?
I don't know. The question is, why did it happen last night instead of today? I don't know the answer to that question. I just want to make one point very clear. We have no power. All we can do is show good faith. He got on a plane and he came here. And if he stayed here for one day before the case started or for 1 year before the case started, he was going to stay as long as he needed to stay. It ends up being only 12 days. That's fine. That's what the government wanted to do. The government didn't want him to turn himself in. He came here to turn himself in. Why doesn't the government want him to turn himself in? Because then they can't ask for detention. So they go and they arrest him. They arrest a guy who came to New York to turn himself in. But we're going to make all these points again tomorrow, and we'll make it as much as we can until we get him out.
Well, again, right now he is sitting in federal jail, held without bond, and not sure how long it's going to happen. I want to go to Aisha Brayboy first. As you looked at this indictment, I was talking to some other attorneys earlier, defense attorneys. They said the problem they had was lack of specificity in this indictment. Give me your assessment of this 14-page indictment.
Well, the indictment doesn't have to be specific. The indictment has to lay a factual basis for the underlying offense, which is the racketeering, the human trafficking, and also the transportation of individuals for prostitution. So it just has to lay out the factual basis. It doesn't have to go into detail every specific part of the crime and every actor in the crime. So this is a typical indictment. Certainly defense attorneys always want more, but this is what was needed in order to convince the grand jury to indict Mr. Combs.
Candace, your perspective.
Well, listen, they didn't have to be specific, as she says, but the other thing is that they were specific enough with some of the information that we found in the indictment. My takeaway really is just very interesting, too, that when we look at this is something that Damian Williams said, we are going to continue this. The work is not done, he said. He gave in 1-888-877 number for anybody to call to continue their investigation that's been going on for at least 6 months. So while there was no specificity, or maybe not as much as people would like, there was enough, and it's not done. They're going to be talking to people. The case itself, you will see that the only person that is named in terms of who they are prosecuting is Sean Combs, even though this was a racketeering at the top tier level type of offense with other offenses. But I'm saying that because even though this was racketeering, we know there were other people involved, but behind closed doors, they've already made their deals, and maybe some charges might come, but most of them are talking because they feel safe, and they want more people to come forward because they feel safe too. But this is something too, I think one of the questions, and it struck me in this indictment that was answered, is that this is an international case. This is why we're dealing with the Department of Homeland Security and not just the FBI. This was a question that kind of the answer was evaded for a long time in terms of what's going on here. Why the Homeland Security? Because apparently, according to the indictment, there were people who were being flown in internationally. And my final point is this: they have the videos to prove this. I know there's 1,000 bottles of lubricant, and all of that is a lot to make a lot of memes off of, but they have videos. They seized his phones. They seized his computers. They have a huge digital footprint, and that's all that they need in order to make this case stick. When you think about R. Kelly and the racketeering charges and any other kind of comparative charges, this is worse.
Joe, do you get the sense that what they're doing here, again, by calling it a criminal enterprise, is saying, okay, any of y'all who work for this guy, we're going to give you an opportunity to call us and, frankly, cut deals. And by doing so, that's going to lead to more information, more evidence, more encounters. Is that your assessment of how you look at this indictment? And again, lack of specificity, But by saying they're continuing, this is a way for them to draw people out who otherwise will remain silent.
When you bring a case, you have to allege at a certain threshold in order to go down the road. And they have a luxury here, and that luxury is that, you know, Sean P. Diddy Combs is not a man that people are not okay testifying against now. That shield has been broken somewhat. And so to the extent that they feel like they're missing anything, they can put the word out. Conspiracy, C-O-N, means with or together. It's powerful, just like with the R. Kelly case. As was said before, there's a conspiracy alleged, but you don't have any co-conspirators that are being prosecuted. As of now, they can always threaten that, and a lot of those conversations have already gone on. So their belief is that there's good money that they can bet that says that the things that they need to address the specificity issues and to get over that, you know, beyond a reasonable doubt threshold is out there, and that information is forthcoming because, among other things, people feel more safe. I can't believe he let Cassie filed this lawsuit. It opened up the floodgates. There were some things that were already going on, but for him to pay that lawsuit on day one meant that more people were going to come out. And when the feds are hitting up your house, houses together at the same time, they typically know what they're looking for. They typically know exactly where it is that they're going. And so they are very clear-eyed, and they feel very confident that whatever they need, they can leverage the threat of someone being part of the conspiracy officially to get that information.
Aisha, again, the U.S. Attorney made clear here that they're seeking, this is not it, they're seeking more individuals, seeking more information. He is now behind bars. He's now limited. The judge said that because of the violence alleged in the indictment and what she called a history of coercing witnesses, that's the reason why she would not grant him bond. Your assessment on that?
I mean, I think that was appropriate. I mean, looking at what was alleged in the indictment, we're talking about a true criminal enterprise where individuals were hurt, beaten, threatened with weapons to be quiet, to stay quiet. And think about it now. Right now, Mr. Combs is facing 15 to life. And so, Mr. Combs, his co-conspirators, anyone out there who has benefited, whether the government knows about them now or will know about them in the future, they all have something to lose. And so I think that what the judge wants to do is protect the victims, protect the evidence, ensure that Mr. Combs, who is a person of means, remains in this country, whether he doesn't have his passport or not. There are methods for those who have means to leave this country, and the judge understands that. So I think taking everything together, the judge made a smart decision based on what the U.S. attorney is alleging in this case. And, as was mentioned by one of your other guests, this isn't anything that's pie in the sky. There's video. Now, they have been very specific in saying that they have video evidence of the crimes. And so I think that understanding that, knowing that, it is far more likely that the U.S. attorney has what it needs to move forward with this case today. Today, the U.S. attorney can move forward with this case. The fact is, he will continue to gather information from those who he has already identified, who I'm sure are cooperating now, and those who will cooperate, because now the message is clear. The message is out there. Your wealth, your power, your influence won't shield you from the law. And so those who thought that they were shielded understand now that they are no longer shielded. So others will come forward. I think this indictment and the timing of this indictment wasn't just to send a message to Mr. Combs. He had already received that message. It was really for other people out there with critical information that the government wants. But I do believe that they have enough now to move forward and make their case.
Candace, the point that Joe made, I'd love to get your perspective on. So many people were shocked that when the Cassie lawsuit dropped, then it was settled less than 24 hours later. And it seems that lawsuit is really started this whole thing. And I've heard numerous attorneys say they don't know what attorney in their right mind would have allowed that lawsuit to ever be filed. Your thoughts on that?
Well, you are correct, because let's look at the facts. There were a handful of lawsuits that came long before Cassie, and no needle was moved on a prosecutorial level. There was nothing that the feds or anybody international was looking at. But when Cassie dropped, that is exactly when the tides changed. When he made that quick settlement, that's when he really opened the floodgates for all of these details to come about. And that, as you said, is a problem that I do not know why any attorney thought that settling this lawsuit that he would think would go away. Looking at this particular case, you see that it's not just a question about him sex trafficking. Listen, Sean Combs is the type of person that could have been in consensual relationships with a group of people and had group sex. That's legal. What he did and what this says was more sinister than that. So we're not looking at just fulfilling his sexual desires. This is someone, when you read the indictment, that drugged his victims and then used intravenous fluids in order to bring those victims back to life. That is something that goes way beyond what we've ever really heard of in cases like this. He took it really to the next level and kind of sharing the type of person that he is, if this is true, that this is not just a question of him having sex, as his attorney said, oh, this was a consensual 10-year relationship. No, we're talking about intravenous drugs and ketamine and things that revive people after they have been filmed against their will, saying that they were raped. So it's much bigger than just, thinking of somebody with a big sexual appetite. This is about power. This is about dominance. This is about holding people's careers over their heads in order to get what they want, with the use of arson, with the use of guns, with the use of taking away money and means for families to survive. This is such a big, big picture and it's only 14 pages of an indictment, but it certainly is filled with so much information that I would really encourage everybody to read it.
Jacqueline Alotto with the No Trafficking Zone, I'm going to bring you in here. Share with us your perspective on them framing this as an international case involving, this wasn't the FBI, this was the Department of Homeland Security. What do you make of that?
I think that this case is very similar to Epstein's case, where Epstein used the modeling industry and Diddy used the music and the entertainment industry to fly in different victims during these parties. I also want to say that there is so many other people that are a part of this. You cannot have this many people coming out and victims and facilitating all of this and not having people cover for you. And that is really the trick when it comes to people that are in positions of power and influence, how easy it is to traffic and produce these sex crimes. And you saw that with the Cassie video when she was beaten at that hotel. There was a police report. Why didn't anything happen? Why didn't anything happen further? Why weren't there charges? Why was it covered up? I also want to discuss, to say that because someone's in a relationship, they can't be sex trafficked is the most absurd thing I've ever heard of. Parents sex traffic their children. Spouses traffic their partners all the time. And this was a criminal enterprise. I think that is going to show that when you have a digital footprint, like they're saying, that's not just video. That's also text messages and emails where people communicated back and forth to help facilitate this crime, and you're going to see that substantiated with that evidence.
So do me a favor. Aisha, actually, I want Jacqueline first. Explain for the audience what sex trafficking actually is. So when you say that you can be in a relationship, you can be married to somebody, and still sex traffic them, explain what that means. Jacqueline first, then Aisha.
Sure. So the technical terminology is force, fraud, coercion. But really, sex trafficking is about being groomed. You are groomed by a predator, and you are manipulated. And over that period of time, you're also trauma bonded to that predator, where they start buying and selling you and profiting and participating off of selling you for commercial sexual exploitation. In Diddy's case, he did it with females and males.
Aisha?
So when we look at claims of sex trafficking, we are looking for force. It could be fraud, some type of coercion to compel someone to participate in a sex act for commercial purposes or for something of value. And that clearly is outlined and alleged in this indictment. I did want to mention one other thing, because in looking at the video that you just showed of Cassie being brutally beaten by Mr. Combs, when we first saw that, we were like, oh my goodness, he needs to be arrested, prosecuted. And then we were all disheartened when we found out that, of course, the statute of limitations had run. Now, this incident is actually outlined in and referenced in the indictment. I think one of the things that the RICO statute gives federal authorities the power to do is to bring in those acts that are crimes committed in the state for which a statute of limitations has told, but if they are in furtherance of a criminal conspiracy, they can be used as predicate crimes to prove the criminal conspiracy. So hopefully, as this prosecution moves forward, even though he was not prosecuted in California for that crime, that crime will be a part of any prosecution moving forward, and he can still be held accountable for what happened to Cassie on that day.
It was also interesting here, Joe, again, when you look at this indictment, when they talk about free calls, listen, there are sex parties. There are people that advertise sex parties, and these are people who make consensual decisions. When you look in this indictment, though, they talk about kidnapping. They talk about arson. And so it was interesting looking at the different examples they gave in this indictment. Arson really jumped out at me. And you're like, my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, you got guns, you got drugs, you got threats, you've got all of these things that work together to keep these people, to coerce them, to force them. You've got the threat of losing their livelihood. They are dependent. Maybe they're on the label. They work for Puffy Combs somehow or some way. And you've got all of these things basically being used to force them to be into situations that they wouldn't be otherwise. These aren't voluntary situations. Cassie didn't want to be with Sean P. Diddy Combs so that she could have sex with sex workers, while he masturbated. That's not why she got involved with him. But she was coerced, she was forced, she was leveraged into staying in this situation because she recently felt like she couldn't leave it. You see what you saw at the elevator there, that's just a microcosm of what was really going on. The idea that she couldn't leave, the idea that she was choked into not leaving, not only literally, but figuratively. This is all of these things will work together to keep people on one side of the line, keep them in line, pay to get the people that could otherwise say something, that witness. He's got security. He's got other people that are part of this in their ways. And of course, they're going to be shaken into doing the things that they need to do related to it, related to potential testimony. But yeah, it was really powerful, all of the things that he did in order to keep these people that did not want to be in place. This is not a voluntary freak off, I'm creative, I like to do crazy stuff thing. This is a situation where people are scared for their lives, had their lives threatened, had their lives jeopardized. They were physically hurt. They were hurt in other ways. And so, therefore, there's your conspiracy. And that's why he's got the problems he does.
Jacqueline and Candace. I'm going to go Jacqueline first and then Candace. By keeping him in jail, this severely, obviously, limits his movements. Do you expect a number of people to have the freedom to now come forward thinking that because he's behind bars, frankly, he can't reach them, and it gives them, a lot more comfort to be able to come forward to authorities? Jacqueline and Candace.
Yes, I think that this sends a very powerful message, because what happens with victims a lot of times when they come forward, especially when the predators are so powerful, is nothing happens and they're retaliated against more. Whether they lose their life, their livelihood, their status in the community, they lose everything just from speaking up. That's one of the reasons why we say to people, don't always say when you see something, say something, because there are really penalties to that. This sends an amazing message to victims that are scared, who've always wanted to come forward, that now when they say something, they're going to get justice without retaliation and retribution. That is so important. I also wanted to say that shame is something that's a big part of coercion and grooming with sex trafficking. A lot of times these people are blackmailing victims in sexual acts that they do, whether they're drugging them or they're in very vulnerable situations, and then they blackmail them, which often keeps victims with their predators for a lot longer. I think this is such an incredible message that he's going to stay behind bars. And I think you're going to see a lot more victims coming out and a lot more people that have already also witnessed these crimes coming forward.
Candace?
Listen, what the judge did really coincided overall with Damian Williams' strategy, and that is to keep Sean Combs behind bars so that other people could come forward. You do feel safer when someone is behind bars. The whole idea of him tampering with witnesses, that was one of the main things that the judge said was a part of her issue, that he had done this before and that he might even do it again. Yes, his house is for sale and his plane is for sale. He made efforts on paper to do this. But what he also did, and this is where the arson came in, is he has tampered with witnesses as he has in the past. There was Kid Cudi. He was the one who was talked about in the Cassie indictment. And it was alleged that he was trying to help Cassie, and he said, I will, blow up his car. And in fact, that did happen. That's where the arson comes in if you connect the dots of these two indictments. And by this decision of him being behind bars, this opens the doors, swings them open for people to come forward and speak their piece and be protected, and even make a deal if they happen to be a part of this conspiracy. The RICO Act is really important here because the RICO Act, even though the Adult Survivors Act has closed its door, that's how Cassie and a couple of other people got in before that deadline. The RICO Act allows you to go back further than just the 4 years that are on record by law that you can go back. If you can go back even further and connect the dots of crimes that have taken place for a continuous criminal process, then you can go back before those 4 years. So that's also something that Damian Williams has on his side, so that when people come forward, what they say and what they did can be a part of this case because of the RICO statute.
Aisha, last question for you. Obviously, federal trials are different from state trials. Any sense, and for the purpose of the audience, how long it'll be before this actually goes to trial? 6 months, 9 months, a year? I mean, these things fluctuate depending upon the case.
I think it's going to be much longer than that. That's my opinion, because I think that, number one, we're not dealing with a statute of limitations. I don't know that Mr. Combs is in any rush, right, to have this case prosecuted. There will be, he will have speedy trial rights, and so that has to be taken into consideration. But I would suspect that this may not even go to trial. This may end up in some type of plea, because I think the evidence as it comes in is going to be completely overwhelming. The other thing is, one of the things that the prosecutor said was, come quickly. If you have something to say, tell me now. And I think part of that is that he feels like he has a really strong case. But what he's telling folks out there is that I know more than the one person that I put in this indictment was involved in this conspiracy. I've got video, I've got other digital evidence. And if you know that you're a part of that, come forward now to see if I can help you out. Because if you wait and you make me work for it, then it's going to be a lot harder for me to want to cut you a deal or to deal with you at all. So I think it may take some time, because I think there's just going to be so many people who are going to be implicated in this conspiracy. In this indictment, they're claiming an enterprise that's made up of not only his businesses and him, meaning Mr. Combs, but other people who he employed and people who he's associated with. And some of those people who he's associated with, we know. They are also very powerful people. So I think that this is going to take some time. I think we're all just going to have to be somewhat patient. And I'm sure that Mr. Combs is going to have to just get comfortable in whatever cell he is in right now, because it's going to be some time before this case, I think, goes to trial, if it actually ends up in a trial.
All right, folks, I want to bring in my panel right now, have them talk about this here. Of course, Randy Bryant, DEI disruptor out of Washington, D.C., Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, former senior advisor for environmental justice at the EPA. Glad to have both of you here. Do we still have Joe with us?
Yep, still here.
All right, cool. All right, we got three of them. So, Mustafa, Randy, we'd love to get their thoughts on this. I mean, this is, look, this is a major story. The fact of the matter is, I had someone text me and they said, hey, hope Black on Me doesn't go overboard on this, but the reality is this here. Sean P. Diddy Combs is a significant influencer in the culture. When you look at music, when you look at fashion, when you look at spirits, alcohol, you name it, movies. So there's no doubt is going to be massive coverage of this indictment and of him being arrested and staying in jail.
You're right. I know my group texts haven't stopped today. I have constant dings all day today, because this is a big story. Everyone I know is talking about it and is interested in it. Someone said today, I don't feel sorry for him. And I said, I'm sad about the loss of the dream of who we thought he was, because he was my generation, and late in the 90s. We were dancing to his music that uplifted us. And it's always nice to think of, this Black man who created an empire. So while I don't feel sorry for him, I do mourn the loss of what we thought was an icon, the idea of who he was. And so this is a major story, and it deserves coverage. And we aren't just talking about a Black man, and I know people are sensitive to the way that Black men are oftentimes gone after and broken down. But this is also about Black women and women, period, who were just horribly treated. I think there is enough, we've seen the videos at this point. There's enough evidence. We know that the feds don't get involved unless there is an abundance already of evidence that they have. And so this is something that we must talk about.
On that particular point there, Mustafa, Randy makes an excellent point, and that is, you can look at this from the perspective of downfall of a prominent Black man. I remember when there was a lot of that when it came to Bill Cosby, when it came to R. Kelly, but what was often left out were the Black women and other women who are being impacted by the alleged acts. And so, this is going to be constant conversation. I mean, look, you've got streamers, you've got others now talking about seeing Diddy with other male entertainers and other women and abusive acts. There was a lawsuit filed by one of the singers in one of his groups who alleged that Diddy punched out Cassie at a table, and Usher and Neo and others were sitting there and nobody said a word. And so this is going to bring in a lot of other prominent people who have been in and around Sean Combs over the years.
There's so much to unpack, because it is about us making sure that when we see these types of injustices happening, then somebody has to speak out. And I understand the power dynamics that play out, and how folks sometimes can be afraid. They might lose their career, or they might lose their life, or a number of other dynamics. But this is also an opportunity for us to put a spotlight on the fact that we've got over 250,000 folks who are dealing with sex trafficking in our country, and about 27, 28 million across the planet. So this is a major, situation that we have to find ways of rectifying. And because the spotlight will be put on Puffy's case, it's an opportunity to educate, to help people to understand exactly how dire this situation is, how large it is. It is also be a spotlight on the music industry, because we act like this is, a case that is out there by itself. But for those folks who have either been in the industry or been around the industry, we know these types of things often play out. And when you deal with an industry that made, the music industry, I think it made $28 billion last year, and hip hop, made its sets of billions last year, then there's a lot of power that's there. There's a lot of people who want to protect each other because they want to make sure those dollars keep flowing. But it comes down to our humanity. Are we going to protect our most vulnerable people who often get themselves, they're either tricked into these situations, or sometimes it is just wanting to be around these individuals who have power and privilege. So we got to make some decisions about if we're actually going to lean in. Are we going to have an honest look at this and at ourselves and the industry, and figure out what we need to do better? Here's the last thing, Roland. The bodyguards, Gene Deal and others, had been sharing for quite a while now some of these different types of things that were going on, and people would say, well, they're hating, they're not telling the truth. Now, of course, it's still alleged charge until somebody is, convicted. But there is a mounting set of evidence from lots of folks, not only in this moment, but over the last few years. People have been telling of these different types of stories of how people, were getting hurt. So we'll see how this all plays out. And it's also the same thing with this Epstein trial. So I hope that we have the same level of clarity and transparency that we've been asking for also on the Epstein side, where we have a long list of people, and a lot of that information hasn't continued to be able to move forward. So I'm one who believes in parity and equity. So I hope as much attention that goes on to Puffy's case, that they continue to place that same amount on some of these other high-level cases that are out there that are also dealing with sex trafficking and human trafficking.
Joe, I think what also is going to happen is, I'm telling you right now, people need to brace themselves. They are going to get a peek into a side of entertainment that they heard about, but it's going to be real. It's going to be extremely graphic. And we've seen these other stories before. Again, I mentioned R. Kelly. I mentioned Bill Cosby. I mentioned Harvey Weinstein. And there are a lot of people, I guarantee you, there are a lot of people in entertainment who are shaking in their boots tonight because they're wondering, am I on any of those tapes? Was I at any of those parties? What did I engage in? And these all are potential witnesses. These are potential suspects. And so I wouldn't be shocked. It was a lot of lawring up happening as we speak.
Oh, no doubt about it. Folks are having conversations right now about, hey, here's what I remember. Here's what I don't. Do we get in contact with them? Is it much ado about nothing? Do we not know? And, what's the timing? What's the manner and the timing of getting in contact with the authorities? Because this is a situation where you want to call them before they call you. And if they can, get one high profile guy, they can certainly get 2 or 3 and play you against each other. And so it is going to be interesting because we're going to get a window into some of the things that you've only heard about, that you weren't so sure actually happened, that you didn't want to believe happened. Here's another thing that's interesting about P. Diddy. If you go back to the East Coast, West Coast thing or whatever else, most people had it fixed where Suge Knight was the bad guy, right? Suge Knight was the bad guy, much more physically imposing, all of these other things. And Puff is the one to kind of say things in the right, way at the front. You wanted to believe that P. Diddy was the, quote, reasonable one, right? Like he didn't have all of this stuff going on like Suge Knight did. Suge Knight was the one that beat up on people and that threatened people's lives and didn't let people leave their label, and his label and all of those things. And so as it turns out, he's doing a lot of the same stuff, but he had folks around him to kind of, keep him in a certain place. But that has been burst now. And I think, among other things, even though he's rich and powerful, I think from a standpoint of what he's producing and what he's doing now, he's expendable. And again, the Cassie thing was an opening of the floodgates because none of that other stuff really got traction the way that this did. But a whole lot of folks are trying to see. It's almost like jumping rope. When the people would do the rope and you're trying to figure out when to jump in. Should I call the police now? Should I call the prosecutor now? Or should I wait till I hear from them? Are they paying attention to me? Are they focusing on me? There's a whole lot of people second guessing themselves and saying, why in the Sam heck did I go to any parties with this man? This is absolutely crazy.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. It's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.